The first thing that felt wrong wasn't the silence. It was the way the building didn't recognize me anymore. I swiped my badge at the glass doors of Helix Dynamics like I had every weekday morning for the last 7 years. Same motion. Same wrist flick. Same faint beep I'd heard thousands of times before. Nothing. I tried again. Slower this time. Like the system just needed a reminder. Red light. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I stepped aside instinctively, heat crawling up my neck. The security guard, a guy I'd nodded to every morning since he'd started, avoided eye contact as he manually unlocked the door. Probably a sync issue, he muttered, already sounding rehearsed. That's when it hit me. Sync issues don't happen to people who still belong. I rode the elevator up to the 9th floor in silence, watching my reflection distort in the brushed steel walls. 47. Slight gray at the temples. Lines around the eyes from too many late nights staring at code that refused to cooperate. I'd given Helix Dynamics the best years of my working life. And now the elevator doors opened like nothing was wrong. The second sign came when I reached my office. Or what used to be my office. The door was already open. Someone was sitting at my desk. Feet propped casually on the edge. Coffee mug in hand. My chair, custom lumbar support, adjusted just right, was leaned back like it belonged to her. The mug said, "Vision drives value." I stood there longer than I should have, watching the scene try to make sense. She looked up, smiled brightly, and said, "You must be Daniel. Daniel Cross. Senior Director of Autonomous Systems. Or at least I had been yesterday." She stood and offered her hand like we were meeting at a networking event instead of the crime scene of my career. "I'm Claire Monroe," she said. "VP of Strategic Innovation." VP. 3 months ago, that department didn't exist. 3 months ago, I was running everything that mattered. I didn't shake her hand. Instead, I looked around the room. My shelves were half empty. The framed photo of my wife and kids from Big Bend was gone. My notebook, black leather, filled with algorithm sketches and half-legible math, wasn't where I'd left it. Claire followed my eyes, then reached into my desk drawer. My desk drawer. She pulled out a thick envelope and set it neatly between us like a gift. "HR wanted to handle this formally," she said, voice warm, professional, hollow. But I thought efficiency mattered more. I opened the envelope. Termination paperwork. Severance details. A timeline already decided without me. The number at the bottom barely covered 1 semester of my daughter's tuition. 7 years of innovation, reduced to a polite insult. "I built this division," I said quietly. Claire nodded sympathetically, like someone listening to a stranger's grief. "And Helix is grateful," she replied. "But the company is entering a new phase." A new phase. She was maybe 34. Stanford MBA. Startup confidence you can't teach, only absorbed by being rewarded for talking louder than everyone else. "I'll need you to sign," she added. I looked at the pen sitting inside her mug. The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. I signed. Not because I agreed. Because I already knew something she didn't. Security walked me out 10 minutes later. No escort, technically, just a silent presence close enough to remind me not to linger. A 22-year-old intern handed me a cardboard box with my name written in Sharpie. He avoided my eyes. I didn't blame him. Outside, the Texas sun was blinding. I loaded the box into my car and sat there longer than necessary, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel. 7 years. Gone between badge swipes. The drive home felt unreal, like watching someone else's life through a windshield. Our house in Cedar Ridge looked the same as always. Automatic garage door stuttered halfway open like it had for months, another thing I'd been too busy to fix. Inside, the smell of tomato sauce hit me immediately. "Spaghetti," my son called from the dining table. "Extra meatballs." My wife, Laura, glanced over from the stove. "You're home early. How was work?" she asked. I almost laughed. "Instead," I said, "long day." My daughter was curled up on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees, fingers flying. College didn't stop just because her dad's world had collapsed. I watched them for a moment. Normal life humming along. Unaware. I didn't ruin it. I poured myself a drink and went upstairs. In my home office, I sat in the chair and stared at the envelope until the paper blurred. That's when I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. The contract. Back in 2016, Helix Dynamics had been desperate. Small. Scrappy. Burning investor cash faster than they could explain it. They'd needed someone who actually understood machine learning at scale, not just buzzwords. Someone who could build real-world systems that didn't kill people when they failed. They needed me. And I'd known it. I found the contract buried under mortgage documents and insurance paperwork. Yellowed slightly. Thick. Overwritten by lawyers trying to protect everyone except the person doing the work. I flipped past benefits and vacation clauses until I found it. Section 11.4. The clause I'd insisted on. The clause they'd agreed to because they were hungry and I was cautious. All patentable research and intellectual property shall remain the sole property of the originating party unless explicitly transferred via written agreement. I read it twice. Then a third time. My heartbeat didn't speed up. It slowed. Because no transfer agreement existed. Not in 2017. Not when the first patent was filed. Not when the second one doubled performance benchmarks. Not when the board applauded my vision. For foundational patents. All filed under my name. All untouched by legal ownership transfer. Helix Dynamics hadn't fired an employee. They'd fired their entire value proposition. I didn't sleep. By midnight, I had the dining table covered in papers, laptop open, coffee going cold beside me. Email archives don't lie. In 2018, legal had asked me to sign an IP assignment. I'd refused politely. Cited the contract. They escalated. Then backed off. In 2019, again. In 2021. In 2023. Every time, postponed. Nobody wanted to fix the foundation while the house was still standing. At 3:17 a.m., I pulled up Helix's website. Series B funding announcement. $30 million target. Proprietary autonomous navigation intelligence. My algorithms. My models. My sleepless nights. Rebranded. I laughed then. Quietly. Bitterly. Claire Monroe wasn't just arrogant. She was about to help commit fraud. At dawn, Laura found me at the table. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked, what did they do? So I told her everything. She listened. Then asked one question. Do they know you own it? No, I said. She nodded slowly. Then they're about to. By the third day, the anger had cooled. Anger is loud. Sloppy. It makes you rush. What replaced it was something far more useful. Clarity. I treated the situation the same way I treated a failing model: step back, isolate variables, verify assumptions, then test quietly until the truth exposed itself. Helix Dynamics was still operating as if nothing had happened. That told me everything. If they'd known what I knew, I would have been getting calls. Lawyers. Let's talk. Soft threats dressed up as concern. Instead, silence. Which meant they were blind. I spent the morning doing something that felt almost insulting given what was at stake, updating my resume. Not because I needed a job, but because optics matter. A recently terminated executive who looks desperate gets dismissed. A calm professional exploring options gets listened to. LinkedIn headline rewritten. Recommendations requested from people outside Helix. A subtle, open to consulting, toggle switched on. By noon, recruiters were circling. By 2, I ignored them. I had a different call to make. Marcus Hale answered on the second ring. Dan, he said. This is unexpected. Marcus and I went back to the early Austin tech days, before everything became a pitch deck. He'd been a systems architect once. Now he was general counsel for a mid-size robotics firm. I won't waste your time, I said. I need a hypothetical answered. He chuckled. Those are always my favorite. I laid it out carefully. Employment contract. Retained IP rights. Patents never assigned. Company raising money on that tech. Silence. Then, you're serious. As a heart attack. Then hypothetically, Marcus said slowly, they're exposed. Not just civilly. If investors are misled, that crosses lines nobody wants crossed. Would you verify something for me? Off the record, he said. Always. Pull the patent records. Confirm ownership. I already know the answer, Marcus replied. But I'll check. When he called back an hour later, his voice had changed. You own all of it. I exhaled. Not relief. Validation. Dan, he added, if they're smart, they'll realize soon. If they're not, this gets ugly. They fired the guy who built the engine, I said. What do you think? That afternoon, I drove into downtown Austin and parked 2 blocks away from a cafe I hadn't visited in years. The kind of place where conversations disappear into background noise. Brooke Ellis was already there. She didn't hug me. Didn't smile. She looked tired. I shouldn't be here, she said. Then we'll keep it short. She stirred her coffee like it had personally offended her. They're rewriting history, she said. Claire's been telling everyone you were resistant to innovation. I almost laughed. She's using your decks, Brooke continued. Same benchmarks. Same test data. Just different names. Who knows? Engineering knows. They're furious. Legal is nervous but quiet. And Claire, Brooke hesitated. She doesn't understand what she's presenting. That was the crack. Do they have anything signed? I asked. No, Brooke said immediately. Legal's been asking for years. Calvin kept punting. Calvin Reyes. CEO. Visionary by reputation. Avoider by practice. When's the pitch? I asked. Brooke swallowed. Texas Innovation Summit. 10 days. Main stage. Investors. Press. Live Q&A. Claire Monroe was going to stand under bright lights and sell something she didn't own. I didn't ask Brooke for documents. Didn't ask her to risk her job. Instead, I asked something simpler. Who's handling due diligence? She blinked. Morrison Group. That was all I needed. That night, I finally slept. Not well, but enough. In the morning, I made the call I'd been putting off. Pierce, I said. You still like ruining arrogant people? Pierce Reynolds laughed. Depends how justified it is. I sent him everything. The contract. The patents. The emails. The funding announcement. He didn't respond for 6 hours. Then, come in. Now. Pierce's office overlooked Lady Bird Lake. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Expensive calm. This, he said, tapping the contract, is a loaded weapon. He paced while I sat. They fired you without securing ownership. Then advertised your IP as proprietary assets to investors. That's reckless. What's the move? I asked. Pierce stopped pacing. We don't stop them, he said. We let them speak. I frowned. Public misrepresentation creates leverage, he continued. Especially when due diligence firms start asking questions. So we tip Morrison Group. Not directly, Pierce said. We ask questions. He drafted the email himself. Neutral. Polite. Boring. Inquiry regarding patent ownership verification for Helix Dynamics autonomous systems. No accusations. No threats. Just enough. Once they pull the thread, Pierce said, they won't stop. 3 days later, Brooke texted me from a burner number. Legal is panicking. Claire's yelling. Calvin locked himself in his office. I smiled. That night, the call came. Unknown number. I let it ring twice. Daniel, Calvin said. We should talk. About what? I asked. A misunderstanding. I leaned back. Those tend to resolve themselves, I said. Good night, Calvin. I hung up. Pierce laughed when I told him. They're going to offer you something, he said. Soon. I'm listening, I replied. But I'm not begging. The Texas Innovation Summit opened to packed halls and polished lies. I watched the live stream from my home office. Claire Monroe walked onto the stage like she belonged there. She spoke confidently. Broad strokes. Vision. Synergy. Then came the slide. My slide. The performance graph I'd tuned at 2 a.m. 3 years ago. She mispronounced a technical term. An investor raised a hand. Can you clarify patent ownership on the collision model? Claire froze. Just for half a second. But half a second is everything. I'll defer to our legal team, she said. Too late. The questions didn't stop. By the end of the day, Helix Dynamics' funding page was quietly taken down. By morning, my phone was blowing up. Lawyers. Board members. One investor who wanted to understand my position. Pierce screened everything. They want a settlement, he said. Fast. And Claire? Gone by Monday. I looked at the lake outside Pierce's window. For the first time since that dead badge beeped red, I felt steady. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. Not announced. Not explained. Just a calendar invite marked mandatory. I joined from Pierce's office, camera off, suit jacket folded neatly over the back of a chair. There's power in not dressing for the room when you no longer need its approval. Names began appearing on the participant list. Calvin Reyes. Susan Adler, board chair. 2 venture partners. External IP counsel. Internal legal. And then, after a short delay, Claire Monroe, audio only. That told me everything. Susan Adler opened the meeting without pleasantries. We are here, she said, because Helix Dynamics is facing a material risk to its Series B funding. Her eyes flicked to Calvin's tile. He looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing the problem isn't fixable with charm. Our due diligence partners, Susan continued, have raised questions regarding intellectual property ownership. No one spoke. The external counsel cleared his throat. All 4 patents underpinning Helix's autonomous navigation platform list Daniel Cross as the sole inventor, he said. There is no executed assignment transferring ownership to the company. Silence. The kind that feels expensive. One of the investors leaned forward. So what exactly have we been told we're investing in? Calvin opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. There appears to have been an oversight. I unmuted. Good morning, I said. Oversight is one word for it. Every face turned toward my blank tile. Susan exhaled sharply. Daniel, thank you for joining. Happy to help, I replied. I still care about the truth. Claire's voice cut in, sharp and defensive. This technology was developed using company resources. Pierce interrupted smoothly. Which is irrelevant under the signed employment agreement, he said. Clause 11.4 explicitly retains ownership with the inventor unless transferred in writing. He paused. No such transfer exists. Claire went quiet. One of the investors rubbed his temple. So you fired the person who owns your core technology 2 weeks before pitching us? No one answered. Susan finally said, Daniel, what do you want? I leaned forward. Recognition, I said. Compensation. And distance. Calvin blinked. Distance? I'm not coming back, I said calmly. But I'm willing to license the IP. The board erupted. Terms were proposed. Rejected. Rewritten. Pierce slid the document forward. Non-exclusive license. Market rate. Full attribution. Retroactive fees. Claire tried once more. This is extortion. Pierce smiled politely. No, he said. This is math. Susan looked tired. How fast can we execute? She asked. By Thursday, Pierce replied. They signed by Wednesday. Claire Monroe resigned that afternoon. The next morning, Helix's website quietly updated. Licensed autonomous systems technology appeared in the footer. My phone buzzed with congratulations from people who'd watched silently for years. Brooke texted, engineering is relieved. You did the right thing. I closed my laptop. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to prove. At dinner, my daughter asked, so, did you win? I smiled. No, I said. I stopped losing. The morning after the agreement was finalized, I woke up without an alarm. No calendar reminders. No Slack pings. No urgent emails pretending everything was on fire. Just sunlight through the blinds and the faint sound of my son's music leaking down the hallway. For 7 years, my worth had been measured in deadlines and deliverables. In how fast I could respond. How much I could carry without dropping anything. That morning, there was nothing to carry. And strangely, that felt heavier than the crisis ever had. Helix Dynamics didn't announce anything publicly. They never do when the truth makes them look smaller. The press release about their refined strategic direction went live 3 days later. No mention of patents. No mention of leadership changes. Just vague language about strengthening governance and clarifying asset structures. But inside the Austin tech community, the story traveled faster than any headline. It always does. I started getting emails from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old colleagues. Engineers who'd quietly left companies that stopped valuing them. Founders who suddenly wanted advice. I answered some. Declined others. For the first time in my career, I was selective. I filed the paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon. Cross Adaptive Systems, LLC. The name didn't try to sound disruptive. It didn't promise revolution. It just stated a fact. This was my work. On my terms. Pierce reviewed the operating agreement, nodded once, and said, this will age well. The first contract came quicker than I expected. A logistics startup out of Dallas, delivery robotics, safety-critical systems, real engineering problems. They didn't want hype. They wanted reliability. They paid my rate without negotiating. That's how I knew I'd done something right. Helix remained my largest client. They didn't have a choice. Every quarter, an invoice went out. Every quarter, it was paid on time. No emails. No small talk. Just professional distance. Calvin never contacted me directly again. Claire Monroe vanished from LinkedIn for a while. When she resurfaced, her title had changed. Advisor. No details. No company tags. That, too, was a consequence. At home, the shift was more subtle. I fixed the garage door. Cooked dinner twice a week. Actually cooked, recipes, mistakes, laughter when something burned. My daughter stopped worrying about tuition. My son started asking questions about algorithms instead of asking me when I'd be home. Laura watched all of it quietly, then said one night, "You're lighter." She was right. I hadn't lost a job. I'd lost an illusion, that loyalty is rewarded automatically, that institutions protect contributors, that silence keeps you safe. What replaced it was better. Clarity. 6 months later, I spoke at a conference. Not as a keynote. Not as a celebrity. Just a panel on engineering ownership in scaled systems. I told the truth. About contracts. About leverage. About reading the fine print when no one thinks it matters. Afterward, a younger engineer approached me. "They pushed me out," he said. "I thought it was over." "It isn't," I told him. "It's just undefined. That's the part nobody teaches you. Careers don't end. They renegotiate." The last time I drove past Helix's building, I didn't slow down. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel proud. I felt finished. At 48, I finally understood something that took too long to learn. Your value isn't what they give you. It's what you keep. And once you own that, no one can take it back.